Welcome everyone to another one of CanSSOC presentations for federated approach to actionable intelligence. This is a panel discussion with the panelists from Ontario, Manitoba, and BC NREN partners. So we have David Smith from ORION, we have Garrett Moss from MRnet, and Ivor McKay from BCNET. So before we get into the conversation that is actionable intelligence, just wanted to give you a quick rundown on CanSSOC. If you're attending from the previous panel discussion with Jill, Isaac, and Chad, you're probably heard. You're probably repeating myself at that point. But so CanSSOC is a project that was established by 6 different institutions across Canada, in support of CANARIE and the Enron Partners, to help facilitate detection and response of threats that may affect the institutions across the country. CanSSOC is not here to replace your existing tools or resources that are in place to support your cybersecurity needs. We want to be part of the shared fabric. Our motto is better than we can do on our own, always in partnership. And this particular talk is built around showcasing that partnership. So as I mentioned, we have 3 Enron partners on the call. Each of them will go a little bit over how they support their members, starting with David. So David, I'm gonna go to your slide as you requested. Here you go.
Okay, thank you very much, Indranil. I'm David Smith, the CTO of ORION. And maybe I'll just start off, and I think some of you are probably very aware, but the NREN partners, as we call ourselves, are part of the National Research and Education Network. And Canada's R&E sector, so all of your organizations are connected to each other and to the rest of the world through this National Research and Education Network. We have 14 partners across Canada, the provinces and territories, and CANARIE. And we're really formed initially to focus on research education networking. And what's really exciting is that cybersecurity is becoming a new area of focus for us. Just as an FYI, put in your calendar, tomorrow at 1:15 p.m., there's going to be another talk about specifically about the NREN and cybersecurity initiatives. And so we'll try not to overlap too much with that talk here today. And today, in addition to ORION, I'm joined by my colleagues from BCNET and MRnet, so British Columbia and Manitoba. And on to the next slide. So just a little bit about ORION in Ontario and how we're looking at this. We recognize that it's a complex landscape of a lot of different players. So in ORION, as some of you know, we formed something called OnCheck. We're just entering now into our 3rd year of OnCheck, which is the Ontario Cybersecurity Higher Education Consortium. And we have just over 30 institutions from Ontario and 7 institutions from Nova Scotia who are participating in this activity to help improve the overall cybersecurity capabilities of the people in the province of Ontario. And just, some of the other people in the landscape, the Ontario government, whether it's the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, the Office of the Provincial Security Advisor, and the OPP, are involved with us from the government of Ontario side. Clearly on the Government of Canada side, there's a lot of different players, particularly the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity and ICED. And obviously we work with national service providers like CANARIE and CanSSOC. So what we're working to do in Ontario is to help provide context to the eligible institutions and the connected institutions in our province as we go forward. And we'll talk more about this as we get into the Q&A. But with that, I'd like to hand it over to Garrett from MRnet.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm Garrett Moss, longtime IT and information security member at Guelph, but currently working for MRnet as the shared CISO for 3 universities, the University of Winnipeg, Brandon University, and Université de Saint-Boniface. MRnet is Manitoba's REN, Manitoba's Advanced Research, Innovation, and Education Network. And the primary purpose is the high-speed network access for peers and then to CANARIE, all in support of research and education. MRnet, and as you may know, Manitoba is a relatively small province in Canada's context, and the 3 universities that I support are relatively small as well. So we're excited about the federated approach to actionable intelligence that we're talking about here. MRnet is funded by CANARIE and the members. There's no usage fees for its services, and it's governed by a stakeholder board, and has been in place for quite a while. One of the new things is a shared CISO pilot project, right? So Chief Information Security Officer, and that's what I was hired to do. It's a collaborative 2-year project to provide shared CISO services. It's funded by and for the benefit of the 3 universities that I mentioned: Brandon University, Université de Saint-Boniface, and the University of Winnipeg. It also has partial financial support from Public Safety Canada and in-kind support from Merlin. And Merlin is a shared services organization in Manitoba that gives services to the elementary and high school, as well as the post-secondary sector. The pilot project started in December and will run for 25 months. Started as 2 years, but for funding and calendar reasons, we've extended it to 25 months. The main purposes are really an information security posture assessment, and then improvement for each of the members. And near the end, to recommend a sustainable model for ongoing shared services in the context of Manitoba as a province and especially the 3 smaller universities. We've done the first part of that. We've completed the assessment using CIS 20, similar to Ontario, and I want to thank OnCheck for this. We're now beginning the section on the actual posture improvement for each of the institutions, and I think that's probably good. Ivor, I'll pass it on to you. Talk about BCNET.
Thank you, Garrett. So my name is Ivor McKay. I am the manager of cybersecurity for BCNET. Thank you very much for inviting us here today to talk to you. Greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to concentrate, since we've had some discussion about what the NREN are and what our different partners do on that level. I'm going to talk a little bit more about cybersecurity services, but I'm also going to talk about NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology framework for cybersecurity, and what the NRENs have adopted as their primary framework for delivering cybersecurity services. You can see here the services that BCNET, some of the services that BCNET provide. And what we've started doing with our services overall is to define them in terms of the functions of NIST. So SIM would fall under detect, and as would vulnerability scanning. Some of the other services like MFA would fall under protect, and DDoS mitigation would fall under respond. So we've tried to define these in different ways so they fall into those areas. We also, as an organization, advocate for our members and for services overall. And then we have a number of services that help them support our members with cybersecurity beyond the normal, which is like training and group purchasing for items. Andrew, can you go to the next slide, please? So where we see the threat feed and threat hunting, and so this is kind of a segue into our overall conversation here, is we see ourselves as a conduit for a lot of that information. We're already doing vulnerability scannings for our members. We have a SIM for our members. We've been helping our members set up the IDS, and we are helping get the CanSSOC threat feed on our members' firewalls. And then we have the we've also assisted getting the DNS firewall that CanHEIT is put out for our members as part of that. So we see ourselves as a conduit for services going from national to our members and back again. And then as part of that flow of information, we are looking at the fact that we try and position ourselves so we can actually feed the threat feed with a chunk of information, well, as we gather it from our members going forward. And this kind of gives us an idea of how the information can travel either through us or directly to a member. As you see on the firewall, we see the threat feed going directly to the member's firewall in that case, whereas we're collecting information from the SIM, we can send that to the national service to help with the threat feed. I think I'm going to stop it there, and we can go to question and answer, or go to our questions that you have in your
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. So thank you all three for presenting what each of your organizations does. So since this conversation is about threat intelligence, CanSSOC is one of the players in that space. So we send you actionable intelligence, what we consider actionable intelligence. I would like to hear from each one of you about what does actionable intelligence mean to you?
Shall I go first, Indranil?
Sure.
So I have a couple of thoughts on this. The first, I think, is trusted. It's not just trusted in the data, but trusted in the sense of the whole service, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability across the service. And that part is important to me. If the threat feed would get read by hackers or threat actors, or even worse, poisoned with false allows, that would be very detrimental to the service. So that's the first, data protection along the whole cycle to generate trust. The second is specific. It needs to give enough detail to be able to take and justify the actions that are associated with the threats. Then there's also two aspects. One is the speediness, right? It needs to be fast because and few layers in between, or no layers in between, because you want to be able to take that action really rapidly, and it needs to be machines able to take the standard actions. But the second is a slower human component, so that the curation, the evaluation, the collaboration, a bidirectional relationship exists between the person providing the threat feed and the recipient, who then can also provide information back, right? So those are kind of the four main points that I thought of.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, so maybe if I can just build on that, and I think that the key word that you mentioned there is action and actionable. And one of the challenges that I see in cybersecurity is that you'll hear about a ransomware attack, or you'll hear about an indication of compromise, and you're made aware of some CSV number on a website. But the question that often people have is, well, what do I do about that? How do I respond to that? And I think the key thing is, being able to actually give the staff at institutions really clear direction, such as, block this IP address, or if you have a server of this kind, patch it immediately to a minimum of this level, so that there are very, very specific things. And that's one piece I'd say that we're really working together as a community, so that if someone sees a problem, they can actually identify not just, okay, there's a problem here, but here is exactly what you should do about it. And I think that's what's so key to me for in this context of actionable intelligence.
Thank you. Ivor?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat much of what everyone has already said, but I think just a couple of things, and I agree with David too on the term actionable. And this one of the things that we put forward is we put a SEM service in place, and as anybody who's had a SEM, you know, you get a lot of information, but what do you do with it? And from our point of view, it has to be actionable intel that you're going to get from the SEM. It has to be something that the member can actually work with. So that's been a really major focus for us. And at present, we get the CanSSOC threat feed into our SIM, so that's helped us a lot along those ways. The other things that are a little more nebulous from my point of view, but I think it may help with, especially on the national level, in terms of looking at patterns of behavior, when certain threats are available, when certain threats start happening. Ryuku used to have a pattern of showing up all the time at Christmas time. Doesn't necessarily do that anymore, but it used to have that pattern. So there's an opportunity to use it for that. And then on top of that, there's also the opportunity to use it for defining threats. A lot of times when you have to look at your risk assessment and things like that, it can be used in those terms of helping you define threats, where you're seeing your threats coming from, where are they actually actioning from, how do we defend ourselves as a larger group in that context.
Perfect, thank you. So Ivor already sort of alluded to this, so I'm going to ask this question for both David and Garrett. How are you currently leveraging the CanSSOC threat feed service?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in there. So yeah, so Orion is using it ourselves. So we're using we've taken the Orion, the CanSSOC threat feed is a MISP threat feed that we have connected into our firewall. So we take that threat feed, and so for the Orion firewall, protecting the Orion assets, we have that. And so what that means is that we are able to block things that are coming in. We helped participate in the soft launch activity and the pilot activity with CanSSOC earlier, really starting last summer, and we have about a dozen or so of the Orion constituents who are onboarded with the CanSSOC threat feed already. And the feedback has been very positive from the people in the community who are using the CanSSOC threat feed. Really we're seeing a lot of, I guess the one thing that I really like about the CanSSOC threat feed is the fact that it's able to, it has a feedback loop. So that if an institution finds something and sees a problem, they can then notify CanSSOC of the indication of compromise. That goes into the system, and then it's automatically propagated to all the people who are using it. So it's got this combination of automation and feedback that I think makes the threat feed a really powerful piece of this actionable intelligence equation.
Thank you. Garrett, thoughts?
Sure. I think David summarized it very well. Here in Manitoba, we recommend CanSSOC through our REN. That was fairly recent once it was published. Some institutions had used it before. We're now up to 2/3 of the institutions in all of Manitoba, 2/3 of the universities that are using it. So we think it's a success story from that perspective. And because we have Merlin as the central service organization, that's also a factor. I don't 100% know where they're at today, if they fully implemented the threat feed, but that's also where it will be implemented. So we do see it as a success story at this point.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So CanSSOC is not the only player in the threat intel space. We have CCCS, the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. Could you comment on how do you leverage the CCCS alerts and notices more towards the perspective of how do you support your members when you see something coming out of CCCS? Ivor, if you want to go first.
Sure. So we forward all the to our cybersecurity committees, all the alerts that come through from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. We let them know that these are the threats that are coming out, and a lot of people appreciate the CSV that comes with that, so they can add that to their indicators of compromise, the IOC. We also have used them to let them know of incidences that we're seeing or any IOC that we're presently seeing prior to CanSSOC. Now that we have access to CanSSOC, we're now sending that to CanSSOC. But prior to that, we did send it to the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. So we use them in a number of different ways. We also attend their academic briefing every other week, and we use a number of their services. I won't go into all those because there's a few of them, but yeah, we also use a number of their other services.
Garrett?
Sure. I'll repeat the shout out to that Ivor just did about the CCCS biweekly academic sector calls. They're valuable. They give an overall picture. They are fast, but the slide deck is that they give every 2 weeks is very valuable. So in Manitoba and for the shared CISO pilot, my role is explicitly non-operational. So I'm by and large not the one that's expected to pass those things on. My role was really to get the individual institutions set up and get the threat feeds and the CCCS alerts to them directly. I also won't list all the services, but one of the ones that sticks out to me from CCCS is their baseline assessment, which they call like a resiliency. The very minimal is a 2-hour or less meeting with your IT staff, and within that time, you answer a bunch of questions online, and you get a full report that is surprisingly detailed for the amount of effort and information that you've put in. So that's one that we recommend to our institutions. And in terms of the support, again, it's a non-operational, right? So, but when there's an urgent one like the Exchange vulnerability the other day, we did bypass that. We made that operational and passed it on as soon as we saw it, just because of the scope and the urgency for something like this. So we really try to work hand in glove with the institutions we support. Perfect.
David, thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of good things, and we're doing very similar things in Ontario. The one additional thing that we're doing is that for the OnCheck members in Ontario, we have a call every Friday morning, and at that call we go over in a bit more, trying to again give actionable advice to our constituents about what's going on. And the Cyber Center, so CCCS, participates in that call together with Orion, and we try to really give an overview of everything that's happening and what you should do about it, including a Q&A. So there's a Q&A session. So if people need more information or want to talk about it some more, there's an opportunity to do that. Just one other thing that we do, and that is that related to CCCS, we get alerts. Really every day we get a spreadsheet with IP addresses that are on our network that are, potentially botnet software or vulnerable IP addresses and things like that. And so in the past year, we've actually implemented some automation. So we go through that and we are able to identify, which institution is associated with which IP address, and we can generate an email to them in our system so that they're notified of that really as quickly as we possibly can, so that we're not delaying that information, coming to you. Recognize that in some cases that information may be information you already have, but we're just trying to share that out to everybody as quickly as we can, because if we're made aware of something, we want to make everyone aware of it as quickly as possible.
Perfect, thank you. So Garrett brought up the Exchange vulnerability, so let's dwell a little bit into that. So with that in mind, could you talk us through how you supported your members when exchange vulnerability was identified. I'll start with David this time, and then go to Garrett, and then Ivor.
Yeah. So so what we so Farouk Nair is our CISO and is our lead in the OnCheck program. And so when we received information about that, we did issue an alert out to our constituents as quickly as possible. And that's the approach if we see something that's critical, we try to let people know as soon as we possibly can. And then, as I mentioned, we have the Friday call. So then on the Friday call, we were able to go into a bit more detail and talk about that in greater detail. So that really the approach is trying to communicate things out as quickly as possible. I'd say this is an evolving area, because again, you're starting to talk about sort of a CSERT function or a SOC function in this communication mode. And we're evolving as we go forward here.
Perfect, thank you. Garrett?
Added to what I mentioned already in terms of passing the alerts on and working with them to see that was dealt with quickly. I also want to take the opposite point that it is important not to treat everything as so urgent that staff have to drop everything all the time, right? The tyranny of the urgent can really get to people here. And one of the messages as a CISO is to address your overall security posture so that you build resilience no matter what the new threat is, because there'll be a new one each and every day. So you may still have to react to some, but you're increasing your posture every time you go.
Perfect, thank you. Ivor, comments? You're on mute.
Darn, there we go. Yeah, so we used the CanSSOC threat feed, and we actually scanned our members with our SIM and was able to give some good feedback to them around the information that we were seeing, including some members who don't use Exchange, and there were some devices actually sending or trying to send. They weren't actually sending, but they were trying to send threat out, so that was useful for that point of it. But we also instituted, we don't meet with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, we actually meet with CanSSOC on a weekly basis now, partly because of the Exchange piece that came through. And we meet with them, we won't this week because of the conference, but we meet with them on a regular basis with our members to talk about and make sure people are aware of the events that are happening on a weekly basis. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to what Ivor said, these weekly calls and including the OnCheck calls, CanSSOC is an active participant as well. Like, for example, for the weekly calls for both OnCheck and BCNET, we shared information around the latest and the greatest attacks that are happening over the last week. And of course, we keep our fingers on the pulse on what's a major vulnerability out there. So we have a minute before we get into the Q&A. So I'm gonna ask a final thoughts on NREN and CanSSOC partnership, and how you see that evolving over time. Ivor, you want to start?
Yeah, so I just want to throw one thing out there that I think is really important from a cybersecurity point of view. No one's an island in this battle against cybersecurity. We all have to work together, and we're only going to succeed if we work together. It's the importance of working together. So having things like CanSSOC and other organizations like the NREN partners, etc., working together on these issues makes a big difference for us. So I think that's would be my key piece, of that cybersecurity is not something that even commercial businesses now very much recognize they can't do this on their own.
Perfect, thank you. Garrett?
Sure, I would say, it's a good example of a federal model, and we're very supportive of that in Manitoba here. I do see it maturing, and that it will build, so CanSSOC will evolve to mature, and it will find its organizational place with the appropriate governance model. I think it's still trying to find its way there. I see it as a solid service to smaller institutions, a one-stop shopping, so that they have confidence where to go. And the final thought is we need each other.
Yes, we do. David?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that just building on what's been said, clearly it's showing the federated model and how we're working well together. And I think that's fabulous. I think that the key thing is we want to make sure we're demonstrating value to our connected institutions. And we want to make sure we're hearing from our connected institutions. So I think sessions like this are great. We want to hear back from the rest of the community. And we want to make sure that we're working together and investing in areas that make sense and really deliver clear value. I believe we've been delivering some clear value over the last year with what we've been doing, and I'm keen to do more as we go forward. So, with that, back to you, Andrew.
Thank you so much. So we have a question, and folks, please put in your questions in the Q&A section, and I'll get them answered for you. So first question, regarding actionable insight, could you share more information on the scope or functionality provided by the Enron Partner SIM? Whoever wants to take that one on.
I'll say a couple of things, and then Ivor, maybe you can jump in. You can jump in as well. Yeah. So the SIM was really put in place to first of all protect the NREN network, and that was the primary use case of this. And I know that in our case, it's helped us identify. In one case, we had some logins coming into our Wi-Fi network, for example, that were inappropriate, and we were able to identify and shut down basically someone who was misusing effectively one of our guest passwords. So it wasn't necessarily a vulnerability, but that was one example of something that we were able to see. We've also been able to, what's kind of been interesting is it's also helped us identify if someone is having a problem in accessing the network in some way that could also show up as an error. We're working together with our security analysts across Canada are working together. We've got 18 security analysts now as part of a team. They've been developing a number of use cases and going into a lot of detail with those use cases. And I know that both BCNET and ORION are working together with our constituents on taking our SIM and using it in a multi-tenanted way as a shared SIM to look at specific use cases for our community. So, and there's definitely more going on there, and we can talk more about it later on. Ivor, would you like to add anything?
Sure, thank you, David. Yeah, I just want to key on that part that David talked about the 18 cybersecurity analysts working across Canada. I mean, it was one of the biggest benefits. We think we're not only adding for ourselves because it was, as David pointed out, originally for the NREN Partners network, but also for our members who are actually using the SIM as well, is that they not only do they get the benefit of the use of a SIM and the technical information that was coming for our group, but also from everyone across Canada that helps build on that information and build on those use cases. So we have a really good piece there to develop that. The other part of the whole project that I'd like to really point out, because I think people don't always remember this, is that SIM training is a major part of this whole project, and we actually train the members that join our SIM on how the SIM works, how it goes forward, and we make sure they're aware of the pieces that they want. So if they want to do their own dashboard and their own specific scan that's specific to them, they can do that as well. So we kind of help develop the training on the device as well as their use of it. So I think that's an important part of the overall delivery of the SIM project.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions, please feel free to post on Q&A. While that is happening, let me ask a question. Recently, there was an uptick from advisories from CanSSOC. So we sent out maybe 2 or 3 advisories ranging from different issues. We have ransomware, we have phishing, and we have a major vulnerability in VMware. Could any of you comment on how those advisories are being used, the process you are following from the NREN perspective, and how your members are ingesting that information? Ivor, Garrett, anyone?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly. So we do similar to what we do with the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. We send those alerts out to all our cybersecurity committee members. So we have two cybersecurity committee members. We have a cybersecurity services committee, which is over top, and then we have a cybersecurity working group, which is made up of all the people where cybersecurity is their responsibility, or they are quite concerned about it. So we don't kind of limit it only to those people that it's their job. But and we send that information out to those people, and then we make sure that we are actually, for the members that are on our SIM, we're actually making sure that catching those vulnerabilities, and then all our members use, or not all, well, good percentage of our members, 80%, 90% of our members use our vulnerability scanning service, so to see what they're exposing to the outside world, and we'll make sure that those vulnerabilities are being scanned for as well.
Okay, David, Garrett, any comments on the question?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think that was good.
Okay, perfect. So Garrett, I have a question for you specifically. Since you mentioned your role is more on the advisory side, more on the strategic side, what do you think from the CanSSOC MRnet partnership? How do you think your constituents would benefit? And do you see that evolving to a point where we can do like something like a weekly call, like we do with BCNET and ORION?
Thanks, Neil. I haven't thought much about the notion of a weekly call for our institutions. So basically we've made the recommendation to sign up to the CanSSOC threat feed, and I see my role often as not interfering with the local personnel to be able to do their job, right? So as you said, this trusted advisor. How we make that a shared operational benefit, we really haven't covered yet. One of the challenges, the three universities in the pilot, as I said, are kind of small to medium universities. University of Manitoba is quite larger than the other universities combined. So we'd have to find a way to collaborate together. I do see some possibilities in the future, but we really haven't started that discussion yet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Would either David or I would jump in on that question from the Ontario or BCNET perspective?
Can I ask you to rephrase the question again?
Yeah. So, well, for Ontario, we do the weekly calls anyways. But from your perspective, what other benefits can the institutions get from participating in the CanSSOC and project, and of course, lining up to get the threat feed?
Yeah, I think that we talk about getting access to information as quickly as possible, and what I would encourage institutions to do is that if you're not already part of the Canary CIP project, please sign up. So it's free of charge. So work with your NREN partner, get signed up, and then you can access the CanSSOC threat feed. And really, there's really no reason, in my opinion, not to have 100% of institutions in Canada signed up for the threat feed, because it is information that's going to just flow directly into your firewall and give you, a lot of protection. And so the benefits are clear. The costs are relatively low because you've probably already got the systems in place, and then you can participate then in not only being able to be the recipient of actionable intelligence like we've been talking about, but if you see something, you can let your NREN partner know, you can let CanSSOC know, and that can get fed back in and protect others. So you're protecting yourself and you're protecting others. So the whole thing works together. I would just, I think as a call to action, I would just leave people with that, sign up for the CIP program, sign up, fill out the OCCA, get on the Sierra DNS firewall, get on the CanSSOC threat feed. These are all really good things for your institution to help protect you and protect everyone else.
Thank you so much. We have a question. So what do you advise regarding scope of SCAN networks? Would you exclude guest Wi-Fi, residents, etc., and only limit scope to staff and faculty network? So maybe I can answer that question. I can start it off. From my experience, guest Wi-Fi usually is very noisy in terms of monitoring and can lead to unnecessary resource drainage. In terms of residents, I have limited to no experience in academic sector because I joined the academic sector in September of last year. So I'm still learning, and I would love to hear what the three panelists here have to say about that.
I guess what I would just say is that if you look at the NIST model that Ivor presented, the first part of the NIST model is to identify your key assets, identify the things that are at risk, and then figure out what you want to protect. So if the likely scenario is the things that are most that you're trying to protect, the crown jewels, are the research projects that the faculty are working on, the assets of the university that the staff are monitoring. So, I think logically, if you look at it from an identify and protect perspective, that's where your focus needs to be initially. Down the road, you may decide that there are certain things related to health and wellness and other things that you may be more concerned about your residents, students as well, and that's completely fine. But I think that if you look at the NIST model, you start with identify, you look at your crown jewels, you look at what you need to protect, and then you go from there and kind of work your way around that circle that Ivor presented.
The only thing I would add, and I'll pass over to Garrett, is that when it comes to residents, I'd definitely look at your privacy laws and etc. and where they fall into that. It's just there's some gray areas there that you definitely want to be careful with, and what kind of agreements that students are signing off on, and what you're held to on that.
Yeah, some of my experience would be based on Guelph rather than my current situation. From a vulnerability management perspective, you only want to scan those things which you can actually do something about. From a SIM perspective, you want to phase in the logs you ingest, because you will have fire hose type challenges of too much data. And like Ivor said, the guest Wi-Fi is notorious for this. But you do get your best data when you're able to aggregate and especially correlate the different events, so that when you have a threat actor and there's multiple ways that they've affected your systems, those logs are tracked. But don't do it all at once or for a SIM project, or you'll fail. The fire hose will just be too big and you'll give up, and you need to phase it in.
Perfect, thank you. So we are at time. I want to thank every one of you for attending and participating in this panel, and I want to thank everyone who asked the questions. Hopefully we addressed the questions, and hopefully we shared some information around actionable intelligence with everyone. Thank you.